Heather, I'm on a plane that I pray won't get off the ground. It's a perfectly clear day, but I've got storm clouds in my mind. It's so foolish why I do this, why I do it all again. Heather, remind me how this ends.
It's Acoustic Conversations. Welcome to the show, everybody. We're so glad to have you here. I am sitting here around the lovely, homey atmosphere this time of the abode of Mr. Kurt Siffert. Kurt, how are you?
I'm doing great.
It's good to see you.
It's nice to have everyone here.
Yeah, you look very charming, dapper.
I've actually matched my furniture.
You do, actually. This is like an Eddie Bauer home. Thank you for the use of your home for the first episode of Acoustic Conversations to air publicly. And next to Kurt is lovely and talented Shane Corsetti.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Howdy, Shane.
Hey, I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk about some music.
I am too. I think this is going to be good. It's a new adventure for us.
It's new, and I know I'm going to walk away having learned something and many things.
We also, Shane and I at least also do the show Beer 30 Live, beer30live.com. Please buy t-shirts. and we were giddy because both Shane and I and Kurt were all musicians of some sort or another, and we did a Beer 30 Live episode a while ago. I think it was episode number 7. Where we interviewed this gentleman, and we were giddy because we're musicians and we're not really leftists.
I will say that
or rightists or communists.
Pete took over that show. That was your show. That was totally your show. I don't think anybody else got a question in.
I know. I get excited about talking about music. I like talking about the process of music. I like talking about where music comes from.
Well, let's go back to how is it that we are not communists or leftists?
I'll tell you why.
It's a very intriguing start of a sentence.
I'm really glad you said that because the other two people. God bless them. On Beer 30 Live, they are both polar opposites of one another. Oh. So go listen to the show, Beer 30 Live, everybody, and you'll hear what we mean. Shane and I tend to be right in the middle, right. And that means we tend to be quiet most of the time until we get into a show where we like it. We got to talking about how wonderful it would be where we got to do a show, maybe not with the same schedule or rigor, but that we just got to talk about stuff that we really like talking about and just kind of take ourselves out of that other picture. So we're still doing Beer 30 Live. This is just sort of a little addendum to Beer 30 Live. We're very excited about it. And to celebrate, I actually wrote an intro.
Do tell.
Are you ready? This is
we have a snare drum right now?
I know. Well, I'm not going to sing it, but I've spent some time reading reviews of our first guest here, and so I've got a little synopsis. Last month, the band Dolorean released their 4th album, You Can't Win, to roundly enthusiastic reviews from press and fans alike. But this album is a departure for singer-songwriter Al James and band from their prior work, fueled by dark country undertones and injected with a subtle rage that shares a bloodline with both Elliott Smith and Trent Reznor. Of the album, Willamette Wink's Casey Jarman writes in this review, quote, "He sings as if he's just slid out of a coma, relearning each syllable, tackling them slowly while searching for strength enough to sustain the notes." Of another, "And Beachcomber Blues sounds like the Oregon coast with Ben Nugent's brush drumming and Laura Gibson's harmonies blowing in like ocean winds. I spent most of my life near Oregon's beaches, and they are truly as beautiful and miserable as, well, Dolorean." We're here with Dolorean frontman Al James, and thrilled to welcome him to Acoustic Conversations. Al, thanks for sitting down.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I got another quote for you.
What's that?
I'm going to quote you to you.
There's a couple bad ones out there too.
Well, you can tell me because this one's you to you on this album.
Okay.
At the beginning of 2006, when we started recording this album, the words "You Can't Win" were an incredibly real feeling that I had. I was tired of being broke. I was tired of personal relationships falling apart. I was tired of feeling completely ungrounded day to day. A year has passed, and none of that has changed much, but I've realized there's a power in giving up on the idea of winning. Al, where did this album come from, man?
I think the writer from the Mercury last week, he sent me some questions that I answered, and it was sort of about sort of trying to reach a certain level of success or winning, and just sort of how that ties in with traveling a lot and touring a lot. And if that was, he saw that as sort of the main theme of the album. And he asked a couple good questions, and I guess I sort of, looking back on it, that was a big part of it. I'd put a lot of time into supporting the previous record, Violence in the Snowy Fields. Put time into two full U.S. tours, 2 European tours, and sort of came back from the last European tour, and everything was changed. The girlfriend that I had for 4 years basically had a new boyfriend when I came back, and I was out of money, and knew that I wanted to start working on another record, but knew it was just going to be a weird sort of time of rebuilding and getting the guys back together to record, and just sort of knew it was going to be a long process until another album came out. And we weren't really going to have anything to support. We'd sort of, we'd basically played as much as we wanted to play from that album. So there weren't really shows on the horizon. There wasn't necessarily, I mean, we jumped into recording about 3 or 4 months after that, but it was a real feeling of being ungrounded, and have sort of worked through that, but that was what was mainly going on, just kind of coming home to things being different than when I left, but I think it was all for good in the end.
The album You Can't Win, one of the things I find most interesting about Violence in the Snowy Fields is that it really is a very different album than You Can't Win. I mean, it's You Can't Win is just,
well, even not exotic too.
Not exotic too. Exactly. There's not a lot of
3 of them, and there's a definite feel to all 3 of them.
And I'm trying to figure out if there's a progression there, or if these are just slices of life, like snapshots of where you are.
I think there's a definite progression within the band. The first record, more or less, Not Exotic, was Ben and Jay, the piano player, and myself learning songs that I had fairly quickly, sitting in the studio and recording everything live, the 3 of us. And then from there, adding bass and some mandolin, and we really labored over it. We also I didn't have much money at the time, so we really chipped away at it. Also didn't have a label or a recording budget or anything. It was just something I knew I wanted to do with these particular guys, and in a particular studio with the producer, Jeff Saltzman. And so that one was, I mean, we were very green going into it. I for sure had very little recording experience, and it was pretty overwhelming for me, and I'm surprised sometimes that I even finished, just because I didn't really understand the process or just the sort of work that it takes to record. I mean, anyone who does it realizes right away that there's almost no magic in recording.
What do you mean by that?
You go in, I went in thinking like, we're just going to get these performances down right away, and they're going to be great because they're feeling great when we're rehearsing them. And Jeff is a real honest producer, which makes him great. It was a little bit hard on my ego initially, and now I realize that it was a great thing for me to go through, and now my standards are pretty high as far as sort of looking back on a take and saying, okay, there's something good here, or like, no, like that's not nearly as good as we thought at the moment.
What kind of things would he actually push you on? That's interesting to me. Like the choices of what
mostly
a producer
tempo.
would push. Yeah.
and it was also interesting for that record. I don't think I could do it again, but I sang live too. So we got vocals, acoustic guitar, drums, and piano, which are pretty much some of the hardest things to record in unison. Like recording acoustic guitar and drums in the same room is always kind of one of the harder things, and then throwing a slightly out of tune piano that was down at the studio, and then every time I had to basically get the singing right. So we went for it that way, and I think we've done it differently since, and I think I could work up to that again, having all the vocals pretty much ready. And but he would just kind of talk a lot, mostly about feeling and tempo, and just sort of just the amount of playing that, say, Jay, the piano player, was doing, the busyness of Ben's drums and that sort of thing.
No, those two guys though, they were the standard, right?
Ben wasn't, but the three of us had just sort of Jay and I had just sort of invited Ben to start playing with us before the recording. So a lot of it ends up being tempo, I think, and kind of consistency in that. But Ben is a really great drummer, and he usually is pretty on with that. And there's naturally going to be moments of sort of speeding up and slowing down that kind of feel organic, and then there's just times where you can kind of you can tell that things are sort of becoming unfrayed in a take or whatever.
Sure.
So those were some of the main things. I guess to come around to the question is that by the second record, we were flying Jay in from tours to, like, for a week at a time to play on the session, and it was kind of a lot more pieced together for Violence in the Snowy Fields. I spent half the recording budget on out of tune string quartets. That was a nightmare for the most part. Sorry if any of them hear this. I don't think they will, but Jay wrote string arrangements because he's a trained pianist as well, and can write music. And I'd call up string trios or players and say, well, we have this arrangement. I'd be happy to drop it by your house, and you can take a look at it. And most of them were $100 to $200 an hour, and they just kind of kept saying, oh no, it'll be fine. And they were really sophisticated string parts that he wrote, and it's a totally different thing for people who are usually playing kind of live to, like, use headphones, and all that sort of stuff was different. And we spent a lot of time doing that, and we sent tracks down to this guy to play lap steel on, and it was just it was less organic, I think, the least organic of all the records.
Well, I was just going to say that. Of all the records, it feels the most produced.
Right.
Almost by quite stark contrast to You Can't Win.
Yeah, there seemed more. I was listening to it today.
Mm-hmm.
Just more levels to it. There was more. It was very full.
Right.
That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
You had your electric guitar. I can't remember who your
right.
But there was all these elements to it. You had the female singer and all this stuff that it did seem like it was. Hey, we're going to put. This isn't three people sitting down in a studio doing it together.
Yeah, and I'm glad we tried some of that stuff. I think some of it worked and some of it didn't.
Did you bring any of it out to You Can't Win? What'd you learn from that experience to build on?
Mostly that I was done with string arrangements until I had a bigger budget to work with. And you could just pay, like, the difference between an orchestra string player and, like, a session string player. They're just sort of in two different mindsets, and I probably wouldn't do it again until I just had enough money to just be like, take it somewhere and be like, here we go.
The preference is a session string player?
Right, for recording.
Yeah.
That's sort of my understanding. I think we took away, I think Jay was dissatisfied with the record because he was busy touring with another band, and he kind of felt like we would drop him in on these sessions and say, okay, play for a week and get the right takes. And he was kind of saying like, wow, I'm just figuring this out. The songs aren't hard, but I'm just sort of figuring out my spot in this song. So I think we took that away mostly, just that we wanted to start simplifying things and sort of more write parts, not parts, but just play, I guess, and know where people were gonna play, and not say, we had Emil playing guitar on this record and he did a really nice job, but it was more where we just wanted him to play throughout, and just sort of feel like a band was playing and not like, okay, write a part for this. So I guess we didn't play parts, we just played, basically. And I think that was a step we needed to take, and we're getting better and better at it. I'm really excited about continuing to record with these 4 other folks, because it's definitely getting better once we sort of crossed the threshold on this last album.
Are these the same 4 people that you've been with since, when was it, 1999?
More or less.
More or less?
Yeah.
Jay Clark,
James Adair on bass, Ben Nugent on drums, and then Emil Amos on guitar. He's played with us on and off, and James and Ben actually had played in a band for years together as a rhythm section, so they know each other really well. And Emil and James, even, they both grew up in Chapel Hill. I mean, there's a lot of kind of deep-seated stuff going on, so people play together really well. So
one of the things I'm interested in is he read you the quote from the beginning of your description about you can't win. And what's interesting to me is kind of what came right after that, when you actually start talking about how, as you went through the songwriting process and the production process for that album, it's almost as if you came to like a new definition of what of what that concept meant to you, but also maybe like a new definition of what musical success was.
Right. Yeah, I think both those things. I think it's hard because this band is kind of as my responsibility has sort of grown as taking care of everything, finances, business-wise, whatever, and sort of writing the skeletons of the songs. Like, so you would think that it would sort of grow in a direction where it became more singular, and actually it's kind of become more of a group effort simultaneously. So yeah, as far as learning about say winning in a through that process, I think that was a big lesson that I really enjoyed the recording process this time, where I hadn't enjoyed it as much. I really liked just sitting back and letting people play and not micromanaging them as much as I had in the past, or sort of obsessing about sounds. That was a big thing where it was like, well, let's borrow this Vox AC30 for this one part to get like this certain guitar tone, and kind of nerd out about it. It was kind of like a prideful thing, well, this is what the Byrds used and whatever. And then I just, for this record, I was like, I so don't care. Like, whatever, like, run it through, reamp it, like, play the part and we'll reamp it later through a twin. Like, I don't, like, if the part feels good, like, I'm not in a spot to really obsess over tones on this record. And I think that we worked fast because of that, and I think that's kind of what this record was about, I guess. And I really enjoyed that. And I'd kind of like to get somewhat more, I'd like to find a place in the middle. There's a certain way things sound that also really affects you, aside from just performances and the actual song. But, I think we'll take a little bit more of an interest in the production elements this time for the next one. But I'm happy with the way it turned out. It was just kind of a mentality change where it was I quit obsessing. I know that.
When you mentioned that, like, when you came back from the European tour, that you were tired of being broke, and I wonder, was there, what kind of thoughts were going through your head there in terms of what actual, like, business success in music meant? I'm wondering, like, if were there periods of times or stories, like when you were on tour, when you felt like things were really successful, and then...
Yeah, it was, most of that tour felt really successful. We were opening up for a Seattle songwriter named Damien Jurado, who's one of my favorite songwriters, and it's been a wild experience to basically listen to him when I was 19 and say, this is probably one of my favorite songwriters, and then basically the first time we opened for him, he says, I love your record, and we've done 3 tours together since then, and have become one of the closest friends I have. Every time I think about that, I'm just like really I'm very thankful. But it was a great tour. I mean, the venues were beautiful. When we tour over there, the food is comped. You have a driver. The pay's pretty great, and the conversion back to dollars is totally in your favor. And so there's so many great things, for a second,
But that's funny though, because if you go on the website, you see people saying, hey, when are you coming back to Sweden? When are you coming to England?
I was noticing that on Amazon. The reviews on Amazon are from the UK. They're from everywhere.
But that's also, a few people, I mean,
but they're a vocal few.
No, it is, and it's really cool. I really haven't. I mean, to me, as far as to bring it kind of back around to the concept of you can't win, or my definition of winning is, and I think I sort of verbalized this with the guy from the Mercury. I said, when we're performing at a high level, and we get to travel and see places that I haven't seen before, and then perform on top of that, that's kind of it for me.
That feels like your definition of winning.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. When me and myself and these certain musicians are collaborating at a high level, and that's up and down. There's an ebb and flow to that, but that feels very much like winning. But it's the same sort of thing where you come home and you're like, wow, that was a great tour. Let's go over the money. Like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. We all came home with a little bit of money to pay the bills that are sitting in the mailbox. But then it's kind of, you go, okay, well, what's next,
Right. I imagine it's difficult to find that renewed momentum after each one of these major milestones.
It is. It's hard, and it's also, it seems like, it's really the bands that basically have a booking agent or a manager or someone that's constantly creating opportunities are the ones that sort of get out of that. Well, I'm sure it's constantly up and down for everyone, but when people are constantly creating, say they come home and they say, oh well, we've got this thing you need to do for a soundtrack, and then oh well, we got these other dates for you, and then you get back from that and oh well, let's start working on a new record, here's your advance. And that happens for a small group of bands where they can keep that busy and kind of constantly generate income different ways, and we're we get closer to that. But
what is that? I mean, what is that transition point? I mean, between I almost look at the artists that I'm the most, I'm sort of one of the biggest fans of. I mean, you get the Dave Matthews, which I followed since, college, and seeing them do college shows and being the touring musicians, and now Dave Matthews is on House, I mean, he's trying to be an actor now, and I mean, that just blows me away. At first it makes me feel really old.
It seems like it's a really interesting catch-22, because you've got like the you've got the duties of trying to create the momentum for yourself, but in order to create the momentum, you have to take a break in your momentum from the band in order to focus on that, which
well, exactly,
Right.
because if you don't, then you turn into, and Pete Yorn is one of my favorites, but the guy is, I mean, he's never made that transition,
Right.
or it's been extremely difficult, and he's a 320-day-a-year
But you
touring
question,
artist.
do people want to make that transition?
That's true, of course.
There's a transition, and I mean, I honestly, aside from all the sort of internet things that go on, I still feel like there's a groundswell of basically word of mouth or just sort of acceptance or something, or some sort of mafia type thing where you're like a made person, and it's like
Somebody's got to give you the nod.
right, but
yeah.
it, like, you know, it happened like Matt Ward, M. Ward, he used to play in Portland for years and years. He would, right when I first moved into town, he was just leaving on his first tour as a guitar player for Giant Sand, and I saw him play, but then I never saw him for like 4 years, except for he would come and play shows, and nobody came. I mean, nobody would come. There would be a few friends and whatever. Meantime, he's like a touring guitarist for Cat Power, Giant Sand, Bright Eyes, you know, all these people hanging out with Nora Jones or whatever, you know. And then there was just a certain point where he came back one time and it was just like sold out the Aladdin. You know, but it was less than a year before when he had played like a real crummy show.
Right, overnight success takes 4 years.
Basically, you know, and even probably the time between those shows was probably a year, and I think he had kind of his first of the bigger albums come out, but it really was like he was grinding, you know, as a touring sort of sideman, you know, but he had enough people sort of championing his own work. But it really, I mean, it's been really recent that he's even, you know, in the last couple years in his own hometown sort of done well.
So it's almost kind of like the critical mass point that he reached, it wasn't really even visible. It just kind of sort of like happened within
Right.
a year.
I mean, that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that for a lot of bands where, and I don't know for sure what it is, but they'll come back each time and you can just sort of see it go up and up and up, and then at one point it's just kind of like, okay, every show is going to be sold out for a number of years, and you know, that's what club people want. And then there's other people that kind of, and I don't ever, if I'm realistic, I don't really see us in that position. Just sort of based on the music that we make.
In what position?
In
that sort of
like,
club sold out all the time.
Right. That's not too realistic. But I see us, you know, as having, like, a lot of the tours that we've gone on, Eric Bachman from Crooked Fingers, this Chris and Hirsch tour coming up, the Damien Gerardo stuff, Richard Buckner, you know, they sell out some of their shows, but it's not this just universal thing. And they've been doing it. They've almost been cursed by putting out a half dozen great records in their careers, and so they never kind of went. They never maybe had a crazy debut record that just made them really popular, or they never had a bad one that made the next good one, seem really great and sort of
the comeback record.
Right. I mean, they've just, all of those artists are just so solid, and you know, but people will continue to buy their records, whereas some of these other things, I really feel like a lot of it will end up in the used bin, you know, down at the record store, for better or worse, you know.
How could you fall in love with the target when I am the gun? And how could you spend the night with the shadow when I am the sun? And all your attention for the corkscrew when I am the wine, and all your affection for the hymn book when I am the choir. Love is blind, then the lights are out. You couldn't live with, and now you can't live without. Well, I'm in love with the love, I'm in love with the doubt. I'm in love with the love, I'm in love with the doubt. Will you spend your time running your lines when I wrote the play? You've got your hands all over the handle when I am the blade. And how could you fall in love with the color when I am the dye? And how could you give yourself to the smoke when I am the fire? I don't think about you much these days. Give me no choice with the choices you made. I can't seem to get far enough away. I can't seem to get far enough away.
I was in, I mean, I've been a fan of Dolorean for, probably over a year now since you gave me that first CD, Shane, right?
Yeah.
Since I pirated that first CD. I totally tripped out today. I was in Best Buy, and there you are. Yeah. Like, I'm looking, there's like Duncan Sheik, and then there's Dolorean, and I'm holy crap, and all the albums are there.
That's funny.
There's Dolorean in Best Buy. Like, that's kind of a big deal, right? To be in the big bin.
Yeah, I didn't know we were in there.
No. Borders,
Yeah.
I'm looking out for you.
No, I
I'll
appreciate
go and I'll
it.
check in and I'll be
where music is sold.
I gotta see it.
No, it is interesting, and there's absolutely no worse feeling than rolling into, the city that you're playing, and you go to the record store.
And you're not there.
In the town. Say you go to Athens, Georgia, is like college town, music town. You go to the great record store there on the main strip, and it's like you don't even have a card there, and you're just going, why are we even playing here tonight? Like, this is confusing to me, and we don't deal with that nearly as much as we did with the first record, which is totally understandable. It was
the first record,
right? Yeah, and it's just, it really takes a while for people to either even hear it or give it a listen and decide, oh well, we like it and it sort of fits with our program here, or not. And I mean, I don't even really want to know what all goes on to get 3 Dolorean records in Best Buy, but it's cool. I really have
But
always...
you didn't have to sell your soul to anybody, right? I mean, you're not like glowing red.
Not that I know of, but
It may have been sold on your behalf.
But it's cool because I really, I have to, probably one of the best moments on this kind of promotion of the new record was going into the Jackpot Records on Hawthorne, which is the one I've always kind of shopped at, and to see the new record, like the LP of it up on the wall, was probably the best moment of this whole thing, because I haven't ever really had my stuff. It's always been in the racks, but for them to sort of put up in the walls, it's this kind of goofy thing, but to me that was kind of my favorite moment of
You're
the whole.
You're a made man now.
Well, not really, but it was just kind of, it was cool.
somebody's going to make a sandwich named after you, right? Isn't that what it means to be made?
That's right. Yeah.
The Al James. I wonder what would be on the Al James.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in these transition points, and we were talking a little bit about the label. When did you sign with Yep Rock, and what did that relationship look like?
Well, the first record I paid for out of pocket.
Can I, because you had Sudden Oak too.
We had a CDR basically that was
packaged pretty nicely.
It was it was the first.
The label was done in Sharpie.
No,
pretty much.
it's good.
It was the first thing that we did that was. I made about 100 of them and passed them around to clubs.
This was at a time when you were just out kind of touring a little bit locally, putting songs together, putting on CDR.
Hoping to get a show locally, basically. Playing. At first it was just me, and then it was myself and Jay. It was sort of keyboards and guitar, and then we added drums for a couple shows, and then bass. And basically we had Not Exotic finished. And I had sort of I was just working and like paying for the recording basically. And then the Standard, friends of ours, kind of met these managers at a show in North Carolina. And one of them came out and they were sort of representing them for a while. And I gave them, this one guy, Simon Harper, he used to work at 4AD and Rough Trade over in England back in the day, and we had similar musical tastes, sort of that era of 4AD, which is like Red House Painters and some stuff that was, we kind of had some mutual things that we liked. And I gave him the record, and then they sort of just basically said, well, we'd like to represent you to try to find a label. And it was a really long time, almost a year. And then they ended up getting us and the Standard and another couple bands that they were representing. I think they sort of packaged everything to Yep Rock. And so Yep Rock, they bought it from us for a little bit of money and came out and did pretty well for a debut record. We did a national tour, played South by Southwest, but they signed us for 3 records, and so we did the next one. We just sort of did it. You take in advance.
What's the pressure of that, though? I mean, like,
not much. I mean,
really?
Actually,
Seriously?
I have to say with Yep Rock, they're really. I never would. The advances weren't a ton. They were.
Do you mind if I ask? What are we talking about?
I think I got 10,000 for the first record, and then it was 15 and 15 from there on out. But
The first record was for Not Exotic.
right, yeah.
Okay.
And then they gave, we burned through 15 really fast on Violence, and actually spent it on the recording and the string. I mean, honestly, that was probably half of it. And in full disclosure, the next record, I basically drank $15,000. I mean, we did it really cheap, and I was in a bad spot, and I just said, I took half the advance, and I said I have to live off this, and I was working some, but I was just had bills to pay, and
It's like, you ask what kind of pressure it is from the label. I think the pressure it's a different kind of pressure.
No,
this is
like
a side
pressure
that
on
I don't.
yourself,
I just don't
I
even
always
think
sit there
about.
and the songwriting process to me is what interests me the most. And somebody who's a definite novice at it and like writes 2 lines and is like, this is crap.
This is
crap. Yeah, no, serious. So tell me about how that works for you. I mean, is it this like you're sitting down, you're strumming some chord progression, you're like, oh, I know, I drank 1 bottle of wine each night, and that's how it's going to go. Or,
were you drunk when you wrote that song?
It was more like 2 or 3, but unfortunately.
I drink 1 bottle of wine each night to help me get over you. And I've grown quite fond of what bottle can do. Puts me to sleep without a dream, without a thought of anything. And when I wake, the day's halfway done. It's time to start another one. So I drink one bottle of wine each night to help me get over you. And I've grown quite fond of what one bottle can do. Now I go beyond where the tears come, way past the urge to pick up the phone. And my mind's a blank. It's better off that way. Whatever it takes to feel okay. So I drink one bottle of wine each night to help me get over you. And I've grown quite fond of what one bottle can do. And I've grown quite fond of what one bottle can do.
I guess I never felt too much pressure. I knew that we could do it. I always know that we can make a record. And Yep Rock was always, I've never sent them a single rough mix of anything we've ever done. They've never made me. They've just always, they're pretty trusting, which I think is complimentary.
You just send them a gold master when you're done?
Basically, it was just, this last one, it had sort of been drawn out, and I hated the rush of the previous one, and so I just really took my time on the packaging, took my time on getting it mastered, and that I was happy with the mixes, and they definitely kept calling, kind of saying, so, and I would say, I think they were a little bit, we had a little bit of a kind of a back and forth, so I think they were just hoping that I wasn't going to give them live in Budokan or something, or just right. And so I did. Once I sent it to them, they got back right away, and they were really happy with it. And I don't ever feel any pressure about the money. I guess I just feel pressure to do something better or different, because really there's a real small group of people that sort of follow what we do. I don't feel pressure from them or anything like that. I mean, it's a very, very small little group of people, and I think they're pretty much just sort of along for the ride and are interested in kind of where the creative process takes this particular group of musicians, and they'll kind of check in and out with it, you know.
The I Knew Him When crowd.
Well, you know, or it just might be I know him, you know. It just might be, yeah, we're at another Dolorean show, and
how did I end up at all 50 of them on the West Coast?
Yeah, exactly, and which is fine, you know. I really enjoy when we tour and see some of the same people that we see every time we play in the same venue, and you know, there's maybe a little bit more or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I remember you from the very first time we played in Des Moines, Iowa, and thanks for coming back again. And
but that loyalty has to say something. I mean,
it does.
It does. I mean, it really speaks volumes of. Yeah,
I think it's rare. I think that's sort of what I think is the main, the first thing that sort of goes with all the internet stuff is, you know, people sort of act like you're connecting with more people in a better way, and I just sort of feel like if you leave a smart-ass comment on someone's MySpace site, like that's not a connecting to anybody.
Right.
You know, like that doesn't really mean anything. Like it doesn't mean that they're going to buy a record. It doesn't mean they're going to show up to a show.
You see these ads of, you know, buy this iTunes phone and
right, or it's just like
sweet
tunes, dude, or you know, check out mine at, you know, and I just don't see that as truly building a community. And I think that, you know, the sort of thing that I've seen with the people that tour, like that we've toured with, and the sense I get from, say, Chris and Hirsch's fans is they're just insanely loyal because they come from sort of an era where it was just sort of different, and she has fans that she can count on. And I don't think that a lot of these younger bands that do really well right off, I don't think that they have maybe very reliable fan base in the long term, where, you know, she's been doing it for 10 or 15 years, and there's kind of like no doubt in her mind when she goes to a place that she's, you know, that there's people there that are really looking forward to watching her perform, you know.
Right. I one of the things that I like so much about your music is I think your voice is fascinating to me, because it in most of your songs, particularly on You Can't Win, it gets almost lost in the band as another instrument, which is bittersweet for me, because I also think you're a fantastic lyricist, and I think I'm interested in where your lyrics come from and how you integrate those into songs, and just sort of where your performance comes from as you're writing.
Well, lyrics usually come from driving for the most part. Almost all the time. There's hardly anything that's really stuck around that wasn't written in the car for some reason.
How do you record the lyrics while you're driving?
I just remember them. I just sing them enough times over and over to sort of make sure that I have them down.
I know totally what you mean. What is it about driving? What is it?
Oh, driving is the ultimate.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I've done for the last 6 years. I mean, on and off, I've worked for different distributor, wine importer folks in town. And like this year, I've driven up to Seattle once a week, and the stereo in my van was stolen almost 3 years ago, and I just sort of never replaced it. So, you know, it's 6
Is that
hours.
painful as a musician?
Oh my God.
It's kind of great, actually.
Really?
It's like 6 hours of just total silence, and I just sort of zone out and, you know, write songs. And
yeah, and where do you have the excuse other than driving to be able to zone out like that?
right. No, it's great. And just your mind can be 100% active at that point in time. I mean, I've come up with some crazy schemes, you know, outfits and this and that for Dolorean tours. So I'm just like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're wearing, you know. And luckily,
Are we talking like Kiss stuff or?
I want
Everything looks better in spandex.
right. actually,
Some guar.
this
Funny you bring up spandex.
no, this last week actually I had to call our bass player James, because he's just kind of like an ultimate FM radio, Eagles loving sort of like, dude. And he called, or I called him and I said, because I drove another van up to Seattle, like for another company, just helping them out, and it had a stereo in it, and I turned it on, and it was insane. It was like I'd had sensory deprivation or something. So Van Halen was like the first thing I heard.
Oh, gosh.
And I was just going, man, this is the hugest drum sound I've ever heard in my life. And this is the raddest band ever, pretty much. It's what I decided.
Go Eddie, go.
And then Rush came on. I was like,
Oh my God.
and it was
You grimaced?
it was the worst Rush song I'd ever heard. It was from Fly By Night,
Man.
but it was something about the trees, like the maple trees or something. It was a real like kind of echo.
Yeah, no, Rush should never
Echo
write a song
jam.
about trees.
Yeah, I mean,
Ferraris. They can write about Ferraris.
gosh. So most of it gets done there, and at least sort of the seeds of things.
Do you put pressure on yourself as a performer? I mean, what do you see as your shortcomings?
Pitch. I usually sing the first part of every phrase out of pitch, and my breathing is really bad. I need to go to like a vocal coach and learn about actually breathing. I sing through my nose and through my face, and I should use my breath and my chest way more. I mean, it's like your whole body, I guess, is an instrument, and I'm only using basically the front right here. I mean, it would serve me well to do that. And I'm not a great guitar player. It's really, I mean, if you pay, it doesn't take much to figure out that almost everything is in the same key, which, I mean, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it really requires having the guys around that I have around that take those really basic structures and turn them into something better.
I think that's it, though. I mean, if you were to have somebody on there, or you yourself, just like shredding the guitar, it just wouldn't work.
Right.
For the songs that you've written.
Well, isn't that it? I mean, it's like you compensate for your strengths.
Right.
And I mean, that's what I mean by you as a lyricist. I mean, I think when your words get lost, it's almost, I have to listen to the songs again because there's something you're saying there that I want to get. Mm-hmm. And I think it makes more powerful music.
I think the thing I'm trying on this next record is to write a couple more upbeat type things that, not just for the sake of doing it, but just exploring other sort of territory. And like I feel like in this new batch of songs, I've written the first like actual love song I've ever written, where it's like actually, it's not sort of tainted with any sort of.
Not like a Hannibal.
Right, yeah. Right. There's no double suicides or anything. Like it's an actual, feels like an actual love song. And I really, really love playing it because it's one of those things where it's like, wow, I'm singing about something positive that's happened in the last, year or whatever, instead of, it's not, I don't go out of my way, but just trying to broaden the palette, I guess, is the goal. Because I don't want to get, I also just don't want to get pigeonholed, mopey, melancholy, this
Coming
and that.
out of a coma.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the good review.
Well, that's not too far off, I mean, yeah.
It's an interesting. I mean, speaking of snapshots, I mean, you seem like a fairly jolly guy, but I just met you a couple of weeks ago,
right?
A couple of months ago,
and that's what I feel like I need to translate a little bit more. But I just am learning how to do that, I guess. Yeah. And I think about it a lot because one thing that the writer in Willamette Week kept referring to us as sad bastard music. And it's kind of this idiotic genre that thinks he invented. And because actually I was kind of annoyed by it, because I was like, it's kind of, it just doesn't really say anything, you know? And so I actually Googled Willamette Week sad bastard, and over 2 pages of his reviews came up.
They all say sad bastard.
And he kind of thinks it's a cool
That's a
genre that he's talking about, but I feel like it's really oversimplifying thing. He calls Laura Gibson a sad bastardess or something, you know. And,
well, no, that's just rude.
And Horse Feathers and Damien Gerardo and Eric Bachman. Actually, Buckner was in there. And I was kind of like, well, this is really great company, you know, but there's so much more to. I don't really understand it, but, you know, he's the one writing the reviews, so I guess he gets to do it. But I think Damien has been sort of pigeonholed that way, and I feel like there's so much hope in his songs too. And it's sort of the Keatsian extreme pleasure, extreme pain that almost always happens simultaneously, but I don't think that people, not everyone taps into that. There's joy going on kind of simultaneously, but you know, maybe it's not as evident as it is to me. But
well, it's delightful to listen to. This album in particular, You Can't Win, is available where music is sold.
Sounds like it. Or
that's awesome.
Refrigerators, or you know,
or refrigerators, washing machines, HDTVs. Real quick about where we find you. You are leaving on tour soon.
Yeah. We've got a number of things, and I think I've actually got the dates right this time.
Awesome.
Monday, the 9th of April, at the Aladdin with the Irish band The Frames. They're supposedly the biggest band in Ireland aside from U2.
Wow.
Auspicious company.
They're a good band. The main songwriter, his name's Glenn Hasnard, I think. It's a good songwriter. It's going to be a really fun show. 2 bands on the bill. We'll play with them up in Seattle on the 11th. After that, at the Showbox Theater, which I'm really excited about. It's some place I've wanted to play a long time. And then we'll start our tour with Kristen Hirsch and end up back in Portland mid-May, back at the Aladdin with her, and up at the Tractor with her in Seattle.
Oh,
so.
Kristen, our relationship has been long. Yeah. Well, good times had by all on that one. And where we can find you blogging over at your website.
Yeah, Dolorean.com. If you type that in, it goes to our WordPress site. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I talked about the wall, the record on the wall, but the biggest thrill was that photographer Alex Soth wrote a review of our record on his blog, and he's like one of the greatest American photographers working right now. And I sent him a record sort of on the whim, and he responded immediately via email, and he said, "Man, I'm listening to this all day. I really love it." And then he said, "Wouldn't that be great if we used one of my photos for the next cover?" And that's like, and I was freaking.
Your cover art is becoming art. You know, it's like,
it really is. I mean, You Can't Win, Gus Van Sant.
The first one, Not Exotic,
and
was
awesome
a painter a local painter, Dan Robinson, and the Alex Soth thing it's mind blowing. And he was like his suggestion, and so I emailed him back and said, "You better not be, I'm calling your bluff, basically, and I'm not gonna get rid of this email." So when we start,
it's coming back.
When we start working, you'll see it, copied at the bottom. But I'm trying to figure out. It was actually a great sort of push for me to finish writing new stuff and just to think about that. And
Well, I mean, speaking of momentum, what's your timetable for
I was
another
gonna say, it's
album?
hard to think. You just came out with
You
one.
just got this out.
Yeah, but we've been sitting on this since June. So
Wow.
it was going to come out in the fall, and then I just sort of waited, like I said, and then I thought, well, nobody likes to release records like this in November because it's not like it competes with all the Christmas stuff that comes out, but it just gets swamped, you know. So they waited till February, and so I mean, we've been sitting on it for a while. That's one of the most frustrating things about when making
I think the
music.
timing was right.
Yeah.
I mean, like you listen, you know, the winter rent,
Right,
you know,
right.
it's like it got me thinking. You know, it came out in February. It just got me thinking about winter and moving on to spring for whatever reason. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
No, it's yeah. I've always sort of felt we're a September, October release date band, but this was good. It worked out well. February was good, and you avoid, you know, a lot of the mayhem around
Right.
holidays.
Well, so head over to Dolorean.com to read Alex's excellent blog, and it really is excellent. I mean, it really shows a guy who's passionate about words. His blogging is really very good, and it's worth reading. The tour dates are on the blog, and we'll put links on AcousticConversations.com. You can find the rest of us. You can certainly find me and Shane every week, beer30live.com.
Mm-hmm.
And a good show this week coming
I'm excited
up.
about this.
It's
I've got some
spooky.
questions,
It's
yeah.
downright
Who do you
spooky.
have?
we got some. We got ghost
Ghost hunters.
Yeah, ghost hunters coming.
Really?
up.
Paranormal investigators. We're
Yeah.
pretty excited about this show coming up.
Ivan Reitman and Bill Murray.
You know,
Don't
these
cross
are
the stream.
That would be
Venkman's
cool.
here.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it's
Actually,
we're very
just saw
excited
that
about
movie recently. It was on like freebie cable at a
Yeah.
friend's house, and it was actually pretty funny.
It's a good.
It's a good
kind of held
film,
up
yeah.
way better than
It
I ever
aged
would have
well.
imagined.
It sure did.
I remembered more Stay Puff.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
Next
then
time somebody asks you if you were a god, say yes.
I'll never forget. Well, anyway, we'll probably get.
Yeah, we're going long. But so you can find us at beer30live.com. You can find Kurt at kurtsiffert.com,
That's true.
as well as deja.nu, right? Where does that point?
Deja is DEJA.NU, and that points to our MySpace page currently.
Excellent. Got some great tunes going on with Deja Nu if you're into some very cool jazz. And thanks, Kurt, for letting
Thanks for
us
hosting.
Thank
take
you.
over your house. I think this is a good
Absolutely.
little
Anytime
location.
and every time, apparently.
Yeah, this is.
I'll bring the beer.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks, Alex, for
Hey,
sitting
thanks for
down.
having
This
me.
is a real treat.
I really appreciate it.
This is awesome. So, for Acoustic Conversations, episode number 1.
There we go.
Gosh, what do we say?
I don't know.
We'll have a
Okay,
sign-off for you
between
next
now
time.
and next week, we're going to have a sign-off. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
The timbre of your voice. Don't let it drop when you hear your little boy. I'll send money every Friday, on that you can depend. Heather, remind me how this ends. Heather, remind me how this ends. Heather, remind me how this ends.
There we go. That was a better.